it's crucial to make sure when you have an issue and you're going to the dealership, make sure you're reporting it accurately. And then when you get the repair done and you get your invoice back, make sure at that time while you're at the dealership, it says accurately what you reported and what the issue was that you reported. Because sometimes they'll just jot down a quick note like, shakes a lot. That doesn't really, reflect what you're trying to describe when you're saying it's violently shaking when I'm driving between these speeds. That's a huge difference. The more details there are in the repair invoice, the better.
Welcome back to Lemon Law Unpeeled, the Lemon Law podcast. I'm Emma.
And I'm Courtney.
And I'm Steven.
And today we're going to be talking about how to file a lemon law claim, what tips you need and what to expect when filing a claim, along with how to go about doing it when you find yourself in that position. So I think the first step or the first talking point should be about when a consumer should start thinking about lemon law, right? When they may start to think that they have a lemon law claim and what they need to look for when they start experiencing issues. So I guess, Courtney, I'll let you kick it off with talking about what you want to look for in that situation.
Yeah. If you're having an issue with your vehicle, that's a warrantable manufacturing defect. So what that means is, breaking it down, warrantable meaning it's something that's being covered under your warranty. You're not outside of your warranty. You're still within it by date, by mileage, and it's not something that was caused by an accident or a lack of maintenance. It is something that's being covered under your warranty, and it's a manufacturing defect, meaning, again, it's not something that's being caused by some external force. It wasn't an accident that you got in or a deer that hit your car. It's something that happened to your vehicle as a result of how it came from the manufacturer. So if you are experiencing that and you have complained about it to the dealership multiple times, every state's a little bit different, but I think 3 is generally the magic number. You've been back to the dealership 3 times for that same problem, and it continues to exist. Definitely give us a call and we can talk you through it. It's possible that you would have a claim, whether it be a lemon law claim where you can get a full repurchase of your vehicle, or just a breach of warranty claim where you can recover money damages and keep your vehicle, is something that a lot of the details would depend upon that. But definitely give us a call if you are in that situation where you've had a warrantable manufacturing defect that has occurred multiple times, or the vehicle has been out of service for 20 or in some states 30 days by reason of that defect. So even if you haven't been back to the dealership multiple times, but the vehicle has been out of service for an extended period of time, we may very well be able to get you recovery.
Right. So I think if you kind of find yourself in the situation where you're like, God, I keep complaining about this issue, or why does this keep happening? Or they've had my vehicle for so long. Those are sort of times in which your brain might be starting to process and starting to tell you, hey, I think I might have a lemon law claim here because I find myself just at the dealership all the time. Or my car's at the dealership more than it's with me. I think those are sort of, trigger words or trigger points where you're like, wait a minute, there might be something more amiss here that I need to look into deeper. From what we've been seeing, there's a lot of common issues that can lead to lemon law claims. And Steven, I'll let you sort of talk about what would you think are the most common defects that you're seeing in vehicles these days that is causing, us to file lemon law claims against manufacturers?
I would say one of the main issues that we tend to see that we are filing on are usually around engine issues or transmission issues. Oftentimes, these are very serious issues where the vehicle is shutting off while you're driving. The vehicle is shaking very violently while you're driving, even though you're going at approximately maybe 20 to 30 miles per hour. So there's no reason why your vehicle should be shaking so violently. Or sometimes even I've had cases where they are shifting gears and the transmission is shifting on its own, or it's slipping and the gears are not catching. So these are very serious issues that affect your ability to drive the vehicle. So I would say when it's really actually impacting your use of the vehicle, those are the strongest cases that we tend to see and that we are moving forward on.
Yeah, transmissions is a huge one, right? The Chevy Silverado, the Sierra, the Ford F-150, the Jeep Rams. I think a lot of trucks These days, we're seeing tons of transmission issues, just like you said, the slipping, hesitating, failing to go into gear. That's another big one. And I think part of it is because they're trying to make these vehicles more fuel economical, right? They're trying to make them a little bit friendlier and not take so much gas. But by doing so, you kind of lose that same quality that you get. And some of it is that. Some of it is, hey, this is just sort of normal. They kind of hesitate, or they're hunting for gears, as they like to say. But most of the time, it's something that they have to look into. That you need to update the software, you need a new transmission or something of like, because they're just not operating the way that they should, causing the hesitation and the slipping. I mean, transmissions, Courtney, that whole between the Ford Focus and Fiesta, which really kicked all that off, and Ford, I would say that's like been a huge one we see, along with like, I would say probably Bluetooth and infotainment issues.
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to the transmission, I was even going to say electrical in general, especially with some of the higher end cars, Mercedes-Benz especially. I feel like I see a lot of electrical issues that often revolve around accessories, because it seems like the more bells and whistles that are on a car, the more things that are going to go wrong, the more things there are to break. Also, a lot of times these vehicles, they're being run by a computer, right? It's not so mechanical like it was so many years ago. It's really being run by a computer. So there's so many computer software related issues that we see time and time again.
I would say also, too, when it comes to electrical, there is a variance, though, you have to kind of consider where, as you have, as Courtney said, more bells and whistles, that means more outside companies are also being involved with putting the car together. So it needs to be taken into consideration. What kind of issues are you having with the electrical system? Just for example, one weird case I had recently, the navigation was not working. And they kept going back because the navigational system is not working. But for some reason on this one vehicle, it was because the client was using the Google Apps map compared to using Waze or the Apple map. Now, that's not saying that every time you have an issue with navigation, it's just simply because of the app. But there are outside circumstances that need to be kind of looked into as well when you're considering, do I have a Lemon or do I not?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, especially Apple CarPlay. Another big one that we see a lot, because dealerships will perform warranty work if you're having a CarPlay issue, right? They'll do software updates and things like that. But technically within their warranty booklet, they disclaim it. And they say this is an Apple product. It's not ours. And so we can't bring claims against them for issues with that. But let's say your backup camera is not working. It's fuzzy, or it's blacking out, or your screen itself is freezing, or you're on your Bluetooth, whether it be, through your CarPlay, or you're on your Bluetooth and you're doing it through your actual car Bluetooth system and they can't hear you on the other end. You're absolutely right, Stephen. Those are the things that we're looking for, because what we're looking for is actual components of the vehicle itself that are malfunctioning in order to qualify. And another huge one I think that we're seeing now in general that I know we've talked about before, but it's just like backordered parts. So many cars waiting on transmissions, so many trucks waiting on transmissions, or even they're just waiting to get serviced. I have some cars that are sitting on a dealership lot for like 20, 30 days at a time because they don't have enough technicians, or they don't have, for these hybrid and electric cars, they don't have the right type of technician there. I have a client that I've been waiting on an updated repair order for like months because he needs to find a diesel technician. All of those things have really come into play too, because as Courtney had pointed out, days out of service count as well. And that's something that you want to look for too, if your vehicle is just sort of like living at the dealer.
Yeah, one of the other things that's important to know, if your vehicle has been at the dealership for a long time, follow up with the dealer, because I think I mentioned this on the last episode, and then it happened to me again yesterday where I was talking to a client whose vehicle had been sitting at the dealership for months. They hadn't received any sort of update. And I said, just call and poke the dealership, see if you can get an update out of them. And sure enough, the vehicle had been ready since August and no one ever called him. There was a change in personnel with the service advisor or the service manager, and somehow he slipped through the cracks and was never called. So if your vehicle has been sitting there for a really long time, just get in touch with them and make sure they are actively working on it and it's not sitting there repaired and you were just never called, because that is not time out of service that would count toward a lemon law or breach of warranty claim. That's just time without your vehicle. That's really the fault of the dealership, and that's not part of a claim against the manufacturer.
Right. There is some responsibility that falls on the consumer, which is, I think, a really good segue into our next point of like what a consumer should do when they believe that they have a lemon and what steps should they take. And Stephen, I'll let you talk about this because I think the main thing is documentation, right? That's the main thing that consumers have control over in a sense in terms of retaining that.
So as we've talked about before in other episodes, it's crucial to make sure when you have an issue and you're going to the dealership, make sure you're reporting it accurately. And then when you get the repair done and you get your invoice back, make sure at that time while you're at the dealership, it says accurately what you reported and what the issue was that you reported. Because sometimes they'll just jot down a quick note like shakes a lot. That doesn't really, reflect what you're trying to describe when you're saying it's violently shaking when I'm driving between these speeds. That's a huge difference. The more details there are in the repair invoice, the better. It does help us make sure we have a full picture of what's going on with your vehicle. So getting the right information is the first thing I can say. The second thing is keep those documents. Sometimes you'll go once, get the repair invoice, throw it away. What am I going to need this for? This might be just a one and done thing. Whenever you get documents relating to your vehicle, keep a separate file on hand just in case it's not just a one and done type issue. If it keeps happening, having those documents down the road, when you come to seek advice from a firm like us, it's great. You have them right there. You have them ready. You can send them right in and we can start looking and reviewing your case right off the bat instead of you having to scramble, going to the dealership, contacting your financial lender for sales contracts. A lot of clients also don't keep sales contracts on file. When you get those documents, please keep them because your records are crucial for us to be able to get a full idea of what you're going through. And one last thing is your registration. Sometimes there are clients who don't have up-to-date registration. And believe it or not, with potential lemon law claims or breach of warranty claims, the valid current registration does come into play down the road. It may not seem like something related to the issue, but showing the ownership of the vehicle or who it's registered to is a crucial part as we continue working on your case.
Yeah, I had a case today. I was talking to the client. We're in litigation. I have a maximum, offer from Mitsubishi, albeit I think it's a fair offer. He's upset because he wants lemon law, but we don't have 4 visits within the initial 2 years or 18,000 miles, or at least they're not documented, right? And so he was saying, no, the service manager was playing games. He wasn't writing down correctly when I was in. And it said that it was the, tire pressure monitoring system light, that it actually was, the issue that I'm experiencing now. But we can't go back in time now and have them change a repair order from over a year ago. That's just not going to happen. They're going to say they don't remember or something of the like, or no, that's why you were in. Those same people aren't even there for him to go back and talk to and see if he could even do that, right? When dealerships are sold, especially, the documentation from whomever owned it previously is just gone. I've run into this problem too many times, and Courtney, I'm sure that you have too, where when a dealership's sold and it becomes somebody new, that new owner does not keep the records from the prior owner. So all of that documentation could potentially be gone. And especially if you had gone in and some of the repair work said can't duplicate and some actually performed repairs, not all of that's going to show up even on your warranty history from the manufacturer. So that just kind of goes back to the point of really needing to save this paperwork.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because a lot of times when clients don't have the paperwork, it's not a huge deal. I just tell them to go request it from the dealership. The dealership keeps it on hand. It's no huge deal. But you're absolutely right. And I have run into that multiple times where a dealership changed ownership. That new dealership does not have access to the first dealership's records. So those repair invoices are lost. So it actually is really important to hang on to it. And one of the things that Steve was mentioning too about making sure that the repair invoice accurately reflects what you complained about is another really important thing, especially when it's a problem that can be explained in a few different ways, like a noise, for instance. I've seen this happen a lot of times. One repair invoice will say there's a thumping noise, and another one will say there's a crackling noise, and those don't necessarily look like the same complaint. And remember, for us to be able to recover, it has to be the exact same complaint. But a lot of times a service writer will write it up in different ways. You might be describing it maybe in a kind of vague way, and the service advisor just takes liberty and writes it down, however they're hearing you say it. So make sure you're looking at that repair invoice when you get it and make sure it's accurately documenting what it is exactly that you complained about so that you can make sure that it's being written up the same way on every repair invoice.
I just had a client last week who contacted me saying, well, the dealership has been sold. It's no longer going to be a Volkswagen dealership. I said, go immediately and get a complete copy of your service file and your sales file, because once that dealership's gone, especially that's not going to be a Volkswagen dealership anymore, you won't be able to get those documents most likely. So this is just another example of what Courtney and I have been saying. please keep your documents as soon as you get them, even if you're not sure, even if you don't really think you're ever going to pursue it legally. Keep them because you can never get those documents back in this type of situation where the dealership's gone.
Yeah, and a lot of states, especially what we can talk about next in terms of what you need for filing a claim, for specific states like Georgia that require that you go through the Attorney General's office for a lemon law claim, before you can even get your foot in the door with them, you have to send them a complete application showing that you've been to the dealership multiple times for repair or you've had multiple days out of service. NCDS and the BBB, which are alternative dispute resolution programs, do the same thing. So they want to see first whether you actually qualify under the law before you can even get in front of them and explain yourself. And Steve, I'll let you talk a little bit about Georgia, because Georgia is really strict in terms of the procedure that you need to follow when you're starting your lemon law claim. I'll let you start from, the FRA, let you go through all of that in terms of, and what you have to do in order to be able to press it forward, because the Attorney General's office needs to see that all of this is done before they'll even get you set up with a hearing date.
So you have to go through several steps to be able to go before the Attorney General's office for an arbitration hearing. First, you need to send a written notice saying, I have had this defect multiple times and that I need this addressed. And this is essentially giving the manufacturer their one opportunity to do a final repair attempt. If the manufacturer is not successful with their final repair attempt, you then need to send a written demand saying, I want a repurchase or replacement pursuant to Georgia's lemon law. They have 20 days to respond to that. If they don't respond to that, then you need to file with the Attorney General's office, and they have an arbitration program through their Consumer Protection Division. And so when you file, the application is very detailed. It needs to show that we did send a written notice saying we need a final repair attempt performed on this vehicle. We need to show them that we sent them a written notice after a final repair attempt was completed and saying we gave them 20 days to respond to our demand for repurchase or replacement. And we also need to show them that there are the required amount of repairs necessary under Georgia's lemon law to even be able to go before the Attorney General's program. Now, the program is great because it is specific to lemon law, and the arbitrators have experience hearing these cases. So you're not getting someone random off the street, an attorney who doesn't practice lemon law, like you might in an informal dispute resolution program, who might have an arbitrator who does a lot of arbitration, but they tend to do maybe environmental law, or they might do contract law, but they don't really focus on lemon law and breach of warranty cases. State Attorney General's office does have more resources and they do have more experience hearing these type of cases, but they also require a higher standard of your application to show that you do have an eligible claim.
Right, exactly. And that can be super, super strict. And usually, especially for NCDS and the BBB as well, you have to list out the days that you went in for your repair. They want to be able to see all of that so that they can determine whether you're eligible. And that can be really, difficult too. But then we have our other states, which Courtney, I'll let you talk about, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which are more lax in what they require, but ultimately we're going to end up in the same place, right? Ultimately, you're still going to be at arbitration having to show your work essentially, but just later down the road.
Yeah, when we initially file, we don't necessarily need to submit a purchase agreement, a registration, all of the repair invoices. We really just need to get the claim letter submitted and say that we believe that your manufacturer has breached the lemon law and or breach of warranty laws. But exactly, once you're sitting in an arbitration room, a courtroom, or even if we settle the case and we need to get the settlement documents from the manufacturer, which obviously are a critical part of you being able to get your check, they're going to ask for a copy of your purchase agreement, a copy of your current registration. So it really just speeds up the process if we have those from the get-go. And if we are not able to get them, or perhaps you don't have a current registration because you've let the registration expire because the car is just sitting in your driveway, or maybe you've sold the car, it's always better to know that up front, and we can see what we can do to work around that and what avenues we would still have to be able to get your recovery.
Right. The current registration thing is so important. And we get that a lot too, right? Well, they're buying my vehicle back. Why do I have to pay for it to be registered? Because it is unfortunate that that's not generally an amount that you can get back, those yearly renewals. But they need to see that you have a current registration that is properly documented with whatever state that you're in, because eventually they're going to have to take title to this vehicle. So they need the current registration in order to be able to transfer it over. So those are all things that are really important because, yeah, we've had lots of clients that just let that lapse because they're like, I'm not driving it anymore. Definitely don't pull your insurance off. I have definitely had clients call to say, well, it's just sitting in my driveway, so I just took the insurance off of it. That's also not safe because if it gets hit by something in your driveway, it's still your responsibility. It's still your problem. So even when we have a confirmed buyback, you have to keep all of your ducks in a row, even until the vehicle is surrendered. But I think Steve's recommendation of just having a file on your computer. I have a file on my computer. My vehicle's not even in warranty anymore, but it just, if something happens in terms, because I have an extended warranty or I want to trade it in and they want to see my maintenance documents, you have everything. It's, the 2 minutes that it takes to scan it in and save it really may be worthwhile down the road when you're prepped and have everything ready to go. Now, when it comes to whether you have a new or a used vehicle in terms of filing a lemon law claim, Courtney, I'll let you talk about how it's generally the same in terms of how you would do it. It's just what rights to recovery you have that may change.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We would go about it in the same way. You're still going to file the same claim letter. We're still going to need the same documents, purchase agreement, registration, repair invoices. It's just the only thing that's going to change is whether we can get a buyback under the lemon law or whether we're just looking at money damages under breach of warranty. For the most part, lemon law only applies to new vehicles. That's pretty much across the board in every state. There are some states that have a used car lemon law, but it's usually pretty darn specific. It has to be a defect that is being covered by a dealership warranty, and it has to be a very specific defect that you're experiencing. So for the most part, new vehicle will qualify under lemon law and breach of warranty. Used vehicle would just be breach of warranty, but it's still going to be the same documents that we need, and it's still going to be the same letter, the same complaint that we're filing from the get-go.
One example of also how it can change the course of action is, for example, Wisconsin. As we discussed last week, mentioned, Wisconsin does not cover used cars under its state's lemon law. So instead of having to participate in an informal dispute resolution program before filing in court, as you would with a lemon law case, we would just go straight to circuit court and just file for breach of warranty and not have to do an informal dispute resolution mediation program. So that is one example of how sometimes when it does not apply to your vehicle, we can take a course of going based on the state's requirements straight to court rather than having to do an arbitration or mediation program.
Yeah, and that's a good point because a lot of manufacturers that we've seen, especially in states like Pennsylvania, which Pennsylvania is pretty lax. You don't need a final repair attempt. You don't need to do any of that. But a lot of manufacturers have been trying to use that NCDS or BBB requirement that some states do have, and they've even been trying to push it along in Pennsylvania in that. So within a warranty booklet, the manufacturer usually says, if you're having, issues and you can't come to an agreement with us, you need to go through our third-party dispute resolution group, whether it be the BBB or NCDS. But that's just within their warranty booklet. It's not anything that is truly required. It's just something that they kind of put in there. But manufacturers have been using that in court to try to kick our cases out, our civil court cases out, trying to say, no, this is a requirement. You had to go through the BBB or NCDS, and saying that the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act agrees that you have to go through these processes, even if you don't have a lemon law claim, in order to come into civil court. Fortunately, the judges have seen right through that, and most of them have agreed that no, the whole purpose of these informal dispute resolution programs are to resolve the cases early, right? They're not to be used to kick a case out. But you're absolutely right in that they've tried to do that, tried to facilitate that. But fortunately, and again, this is why it's so important to have an attorney, we've been able to fight that and show that no, that's not a requirement. That's not something that you have to do, and push the breach of warranty claim forward through the civil court system. Used vehicles, too, are tricky. I had a case this morning that I was on with the client because she purchased a vehicle in New York. She no longer has her bumper-to-bumper warranty. She only has her powertrain warranty. And so we were trying to assess what kind of claim that she would have, because used vehicles typically fall under a used car warranty. But like Courtney said, those are really tricky and really difficult because they're against the dealership, and you have to show a specific number of repair attempts within a specific amount of time. But it, again, why it's so important to have an attorney, because that can be very specific and those rules are very strict when trying to push a used car lemon law claim forward. Now, when it comes to actually filing and starting your lemon law claim, Steve, I'll let you talk about how long these processes usually take, because it really varies, though. I know it's hard to give like a firm timeline on those.
So every state is different on how they process a case once it gets filed. For example, in Maryland, I've had cases where they issued a scheduling order within the first 2 months. I've had other cases in other states where it took about 4 months to get a scheduling order. Oftentimes, the courts want to see the parties try to resolve this on their own, even though we are filed. They are there to hear your case. That is the ultimate outcome if your case is not able to be resolved prior to. However, there are ways that they do try to see if the parties can try to reach a resolution. So this can lead to possibly court-ordered mediation or arbitration, where you meet with an arbitrator or mediator. When you retain a firm like us, what we'll do is we'll review your case and we'll draft a letter sending it to the manufacturer saying that you have these defects, there are issues with the vehicle, and send an initial demand to the manufacturer seeking for them to respond. Usually that takes about 2 to 3 weeks for the manufacturer to respond to our letter. Once they respond, there's what we call the acknowledgement letter. The manufacturer will say, we've received your letter. Please send us all the documents you have, and we'll take a look at your case and we'll give you a response soon. Usually that'll take between 30 to 120 days, depending on which manufacturer. Every manufacturer has their own process, and sometimes they will also send the work out to outside counsel rather than doing it internally. So that does have an effect on how long it takes for them to review the case. During that time, we do follow up with them to make sure that they are still reviewing it, that they have not kind of gone silent on us. But once we receive their response, that's where we begin to try to see what can we do to resolve this case. We'll talk to you about what we think is realistic outcome and talk about the expectations and the strengths and weaknesses of your claim. Usually it takes between 2 months to 3 months, hopefully at best, to try to get your case resolved during that course. If we don't, then we have to start looking at, well, what's the next step? And this is where we would start talking about filing your case. And there's a couple of different ways that can go.
Right. It really is stringent or dependent on who the manufacturer is and whether we can come to an agreement early on or not. And Courtney, I'll let you talk a little bit about the litigation process, what that looks like, because that's manufacturer dependent too, right? In terms of what kind of litigation are we looking at? How long is it going to take? And what is going to be required of our client?
Yeah, absolutely true. So when we file a complaint, it can really last anywhere from a few months to a year to even a year and a half to, in some states, possibly upwards of 2 years. It's really going to depend upon the manufacturer, if they're a manufacturer that is likely to settle early, or if they're one that's going to take the case all the way to court. There are some that we work with that will settle early, and usually within a few months of filing a complaint, we'll have an offer. But there's other ones that try as we may, and we do try a lot, and will continue to pester and follow up and be a thorn in their side. They don't make offers until the eve of a court proceeding. So it really is very manufacturer dependent, and again, even state dependent, because some states have an arbitration program where the cases are submitted to mandatory arbitration before going to court. And that will a lot of times cause a case to settle. We can usually resolve it at that stage. But some states like New York don't have an arbitration program. So these cases just sit until the court is ready to hear them. And it can be upwards of 2 years. So if you're dealing with a manufacturer that's not going to just make a voluntary offer and is going to wait until you're actually in court, it could actually take about 2 years. And it's just something to think about. Do you want to hold on to your car during that time? Or are you going to continue to go back to the dealership during that time? So it's definitely something to consider when you're deciding whether it would be worth it to file a lawsuit or not.
Yeah, I had a call just yesterday with a client who we had a decent offer on the table. Maybe if we had filed the lawsuit, we could have gotten like a little bit more, like a couple thousand more. But when he was asking me what I thought he should do, I was like, well, we're probably looking at maybe a couple $1,000s more. And even though this was a case that I knew that we would settle it early, we would still, even just from filing the complaint, serving it and doing all that, I knew we were still looking at an additional at least 2 to 3 months before we would get there. And he was like, by the time we get there with my monthly payment, I will have spent that money that we would have gotten additional anyway. So ended up just taking the settlement that we had now so that he could trade in the car now, as opposed to having to wait, get a couple thousand that really didn't mean much to him anyway. So that's all good things to take into consideration when you're deciding which way to go, and why it's so important to have an attorney, right? Because we know all this. We know who the attorneys are and what they're looking for. Because some of the biggest pitfalls that I think, at least I've experienced with consumers, and Steve, you can kind of chime in on this too. So when we get a client that came in, right, and they tell us maybe after the fact that they have an NCDS or BBB claim pending, or they submitted an application in New Jersey, or they submitted an application to the New York Attorney General's office, sometimes they do it and it's premature, right? Sometimes they think that they have the requisite number of visits or days out of service and they don't. And I think that's a big pitfall, is sort of jumping the gun, right, if you will, in terms of pushing it forward.
Absolutely. And you know what? Also, there's a lot of great sources online just for a general explanation of every state's lemon law. But again, they're just general explanations. They're not actually the full concept of what is actually required. They do lay out the general rules. So it's easy to read online and say, well, I've had 3 repair attempts. I qualify. I've had all these repairs take place before 18,000 miles. I qualify. But do you really qualify? That's why you really need to seek out legal counsel like us to be able to say, well, actually what you need is 3 repair attempts and the issue keeps happening for the same issue, not 3 completely random issues. There are times where clients will just see something and say, well, I had this speaker issue once. Well, that's when was the last time it happened? Well, it hasn't happened for 4 months. Do I have a lemon law claim? Well, it's not ongoing, and you didn't meet the requirements. You were close, and sometimes clients don't understand that being close is not the same as meeting the minimum requirement. To be clear, the minimum requirement. And that's just to meet and see if you are eligible too. That doesn't guarantee that you are eligible. So that's why seeking legal advice is always a great next step when you are on the verge of, well, is this a lemon? Don't just assume it is. You should really speak to someone who has the knowledge and experience, who's seen it in courts, who know the case law, who know the statutes. That's when firms like us come in to try to help you understand whether or not you have a qualifying case. So that is a major pitfall, is just assuming based on basic readings of the online resources. And also, even calling the Attorney General's office for your state is helpful, but they can't give you legal advice. They can give you a general explanation maybe, but they can't really tell you whether or not your vehicle qualifies based on the type of issues you're having. So a lot of times clients will say, well, I spoke with the Attorney General's office. They said I have a case. That's very unlikely. They may say you may qualify, but they will always tell you, talk to an attorney and get legal advice. So don't always jump the gun when you have something quickly happen, because it may not be what you think.
Right, exactly. And so that kind of leads to our next point of how will a consumer know if they're working with the right lemon law attorney? And that's a really difficult question to answer, I think, because everybody, is different, right? And everybody may have different requirements. But I think what it sort of comes down to is who you feel the most comfortable with, right? Who do you feel like is actually giving you legitimate advice? Who do you think has your best interests at hand while also being realistic with you, right? Cornell, you talk about managing clients' expectations and making sure that they fully understand what they're entitled to, because that's really important in terms of setting the case up for future settlements.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I wanted to talk about as soon as you said knowing which firm to go with. You want to go with someone who's going to be realistic with you, who's not just going to look at everything through rose-colored glasses to sign you up and get you as a client and promise you the world. And 6 months from now, you're going to be super disappointed and maybe have relied upon that advice. Perhaps you could have traded your vehicle in or done something a little bit different, and you relied upon this advice that, oh, I'm going to get the vehicle bought back for you, when in reality, there's a very slim chance that that's going to happen. So look for someone who's going to be realistic with you, who's not just going to paint a super great picture, because although we of course want to get the best recovery for everyone, sometimes if something seems a little good to be true, it might actually be a little bit too good to be true. So you want someone who's going to be practical, be realistic, and let you know what you're really going to be looking at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I have clients who I have to kind of give hard news to when they first come on and say, well, these are the issues that you're having with your case, but these are going to be other arguments that are going to be brought up if we were to go to court. Sometimes the higher mileage might be an issue. When did these issues start taking place during your ownership of the vehicle? There are things that we have to tell you that are not always going to be, as Courtney said, through rosy glasses, but they need to be open and front with you so that way you understand fully what you're about to get into.
Yeah, I think that any attorney that says I can guarantee an outcome or I can guarantee you a timeline, that to me is just kind of questionable because you can't guarantee an outcome. You can't guarantee how quickly the manufacturer is going to respond. You can't guarantee how quickly it's going to move through court. You can give a ballpark, you can give ideas, but any sort of like 100% guarantee this is what's going to happen, that to me kind of raises a red flag in terms of, are you dealing with the right person? Is this person going to level with you and tell you really what's going on with your claim? Or are they just telling you what you want to hear to get you through the door? So I would just sort of have your guard up a little bit. And I mean, thank goodness for Google, right? There's so much online information out there. You can look up the firm. You can see who the attorneys are. You can see where they're barred, where are they practicing. So you can get sort of a feel for them and who they are so you know who you're dealing with. And especially on our website, we're all on there, right? We have all of our bios, we have all of our state pages and everything to help give you information in terms of who the attorneys are with our firm, along with having the different states that we practice in and the lemon laws that apply to that state. Our website is lemonlawcar.com, and it's a very good resource to have. Along, like we've talked about before, the state's attorney general's office has really good information for your lemon laws. And Google, I think Google's a really good resource in the reviews that a firm may have, according especially to those that are most recent, right? Because a lot of firms have been around for a while, so they may have accumulated a lot of reviews, but you're going to want to look at too, like, well, how recently have people posted on here? What have things looked like lately? Who are the attorneys that are there? Who will I be dealing with? And information like that to make sure you know you're taking a step in the right direction. And of course, like we'll always say, please feel free to call our intake line and get a feel for our firm and how we may or may not be able to help you at 833-4-CAR-LAW for any assistance you may need. And on that note, we want to thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Lemon Law Unpeeled is for informative purposes only. It is not to take the place of legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship between the viewers and Robison Lemon Law Group. Individual results also may vary as outcomes are determined on a case-by-case basis.